Code. Okay, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Stoa. As a reminder, this is a community-funded project, so if you enjoy listening, you can support our work by sending some sats to the QR code on bitcoinstoa.com, which is our website, or you can listen through Fountain app, and that allows you to boost or stream sats. Current Moscow time is 37:89 at 7:93:406, and for those unfamiliar with Moscow time, this is being recorded at Bitcoin block 793,406, and with $1, you can currently purchase 3,789 sats. Now, this might not be super shocking right now, but the hope is that when this lives in the interwebs in the next decade, that becomes sort of a shocking timestamp of where we are right now and the opportunity we have right now. So with that said, it's my honor to welcome Luke Broyles to the Stoa to share his wisdom and his perspective on Bitcoin. So Luke, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. I'm super excited for the interview today. And I was kind of reviewing what I had written down, and probably after a whirlwind of podcast interviews, you might be getting tired of introducing yourself. So before we ask some specific questions, before I go through some specific questions, I want to start this one off a little bit differently with a really broad question, and you can feel free to take it whatever direction you want and for as long as you want. Why do you care about Bitcoin?
Um, well, I care because I care about beautiful things. I'm outside right now. It's absolutely gorgeous. There are flowers all over. There's a little hummingbird that just showed up across the way, actually. And I love beautiful things. I love nature. I've been very fortunate to go to places around the world where I've met people that live in beautiful places that that don't have the same luxuries that we do here in the West. You're in Moscow? Is that or unless you
No,
want to say?
I'm in Montreal, Canada. Moscow time was it got like a huge amount of hype because Jack Dorsey did, I think.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it's basically the Bitcoin block and how many sats you can buy with the US dollar. And I always timestamp with that. I took that from Gigi.
Got it. Okay. Well. Anyway, I was going to say that if you're over there, we would be perceived enemies right now.
Right.
And like even though you aren't, I do have friends over in Russia, and so when you have people that are in nations that are at war, and or proxy war, and you've met people that don't have the same luxuries and comforts that we have here in the West, and the West, first world, developed world, what do you want to call it? It really is upsetting, really is frustrating. Um, I I'm of the personal conviction that I should do the best I can when I'm here on Earth, and I should make as many lives better as I possibly can. And I know that bettering technology does not necessarily make lives better. It does not necessarily make happiness improve. And it's one of the things I worry about. There are many people here in the West that are depressed, I would say, as a percentage basis, than people in the rest of the world. So, it's a complicated thing, but the more I think about it, it's just the more obvious it becomes to me that the better we can upgrade everyone in the world to better forms of energy and higher forms of energy, the better it would be. I was in Guatemala recently on a mission trip, and that's exactly what we're doing. They use open firewood stoves, and by just upgrading them to the next tier up of a enclosed stove, it changes their life. It changes their environment. It changes their kids' future. It changes their ability to have freedom during the day. I mean, it changes education. It changes everything in their culture. And it became clear to me, not directly, indirectly over the course of years, over the last few years, that money and the corruption of money is the foundation of society. And so if we could upgrade our monetary energy, if we could upgrade the energy at which we store for the future, that makes the future a lot brighter. And so in the same way I love nature, in the same way I love the little critters, in the same way that I do my best to love my neighbor and love people to serve, like to me, it just became obvious that the most effective way at which to service the highest number of people around the world globally is to upgrade their money. I've been involved, or not necessarily involved. I've been my dad's a pastor, and I have many friends and family and connections in the nonprofit Christian church, Christian missionary world, and so many of these groups don't realize if the positive implications of what Bitcoin could do for them. I've seen people put so many resources into one mission or one directive or one objective. And it's just, what if we could indirectly add fuel to the fire to every positive movement, all positive momentum simultaneously? And to me, that's what upgrading the money seems to do. And so perhaps for alternates to Bitcoin, maybe gold, maybe something else you've not thought of yet, but I can't find it. I can't see it. So anyway, when you find something that is that beautiful, when you find something that has that promise, when you find something that has the potential to improve that many lives, I can't justify anything else in my time. So yeah.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I remember, I think it was Jack Dorsey said on stage, I think at Bitcoin 2022, he said, Bitcoin is the most important thing in the world. And it really sunk in at that point. 2 years ago, I was trying really hard to help people take better care of themselves. I used to be a symptom treater. I'm trained as a physio. Realized quickly that actually the most effective way to help people improve their health is not to treat the symptoms of their disease. It's actually to help them understand why they have the problem and empower them to resolve it themselves by making changes in their lives. And so spent a lot of time trying to solve the health problem, and came to this kind of hard realization a couple of years ago that actually the health problem is simply a derivative of the money problem. Because the most common thing I heard from people that were having problems with their health was, they're like, I want to be healthy. I was like, what's the biggest obstacle to you perceiving yourself as being able to be healthier? And they said, I don't have the time. And what I realized was, so long as everyone's time is being stolen from them, nobody will have the time to take care of themselves. And the tool we use to store our time is money. So if our money's corrupted, everyone's health is going to suffer, not to mention so many other areas of society. So yeah, I agree. Once you really dive through all the deep layer cake of all the big problems we have, and there's no shortage of problems. And if you find a deep sense of meaning in reducing suffering, and you realize that actually the biggest source of suffering globally for humanity is the money, then we already have a solution. That's the crazy part, right? It's not like you and I have to create some new form of money. It exists. And the only work to do is to improve the financial literacy so that people can understand it exists and understand how to shift over to the new world where they can protect their own energy and actually have property rights. So yeah, I share it. It's always a treat to speak to people who kind of have done a lot of work to understand this and find the sense of meaning and are visibly doing the work to help upgrade the world in their own way, but also anchored to this same sort of deep sense of purpose where if we fix the money, most of the world's problems may not be completely fixed, but it's almost impossible to fix those problems if we don't fix the money. So
yeah. I mean, the thing I would add to that is that people get upset me when I bring this up, but I just like to be transparent, that I'm a Christian, so I have a given worldview, and my worldview, or the Christian worldview, is that the fundamental problem is sin. And I would say that on top of that, the fundamental problem with society or societal structures is that humans are able to manipulate the money. And so it's like, this is why, people have asked me why so many religious people and atheists both have grabbed on to Bitcoin. I think atheists do because they like to focus on rationality and have that be their emphasis. And the Christians tend to grab onto it for that reason, that they already, in their belief system, already believe that no human is perfect, and that when you give any human any amount of power, that they'll just distort it, they'll just corrupt it. And so you pair that together, it's like, oh well, of course it becomes obvious that no human can be in control, and the only thing that makes sense is something outside human control. And so like you were saying with food, like, to me, that's one of the things I've really hammered on. I think that's one of the reasons people like to try to say, because I think us Bitcoiners, we like to focus on the symptoms, like you're saying. But I think if you just focus on the underlying problem, I think everything else becomes so much more obvious. If you explain to people that if you give anyone, doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, government, corporation, bank, whatever, if you give people the ability to create money, aka print energy, Well, of course they're going to disrupt the food. And like you're saying, it's so frustrating because people, I would say number one reason is that they don't have time. And number two reason is that all the expedient things are cheaper. It
Right.
is cheaper to buy the garbage food. And why is that? It's because we print money to subsidize the garbage food. I mean, it, but when you view it that way, it becomes so obvious,
Right.
that if humans, if we have a needless, say, 20 to 30% tax every year between unnecessary taxes plus inflation and debasement, and that's just in the United States. Like in Europe, it's probably, I don't know, 5-10% higher than that, and the rest of the world is probably like 50%. If the whole world is spending 20 to 50% of their working hours every single year, just outpacing the rate of exponential decay of their money. I mean, it's like, of course, they don't have time for exercise. Number one, physical health. So then, of course, number two, their mental state's going to get messed up. And it's like normies don't understand that. Like, why do we have all of these mental health epidemics over the last couple of decades? Yeah, sure, these smart devices are certainly a part to play, but I would argue that as large of a contributor, if not a larger contributor, is this underlying sense of hopelessness, underlying sense that we can't save for the future. Because I mean, it's like, well, people would still scroll on the phones if we had that, and I think perhaps they would. But I think a big part of the reason why we doom scroll on our phones is because we have this underlying sense of fear and of uncertainty about what's wrong, and we're trying to figure that out. And anyway, yeah, all that to say is that when it comes to symptoms versus problems, I fully agree. When it comes to food and everything else, it's really remarkable.
Yeah, I think often, it's painful to see yourself falling behind, to work,
Yeah,
exponentially harder and see yourself falling further and further behind. And I think often, I agree there's issues with technology and the way it's being applied in the game theory that's, the asymmetry of power between the companies who have billions of dollars to learn how to hack human
yeah,
psychology and the human who really isn't prepared to deal with this crazy
yeah,
technology. But I think often our devices are sort of like pain control, right? It's like a painkiller where I'm feeling so lost in this chaos, so sad that I keep falling behind, despite me doing my best efforts to work harder and make ends meet. That just getting a dopamine dump from this supercomputer in my pocket makes me feel a little bit better for a short period of time. And I don't fault anyone for doing that. My question isn't why are people looking for pain relief? It's why the pain? Like where's the pain coming from,
yeah,
and what is actually causing the pain? Which is a much harder question to ask, to actually much harder problem to solve. But inevitably, all of those inquiries have led me to the same end destination, which is the money is corrupted. It's resulting in this plethora of different ways that it manifests, that the symptoms manifest with each person and each culture and each society. But at the end of the day, it's still the money. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I actually heard you say something very recently on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, and you said I'm risk averse. I don't want to speculate in
Yeah,
investments when I can just own the money. And I think for most people, I think part of the thing I battle with now, and I really try and gain an awareness of, is like you said before, when you see it, it becomes so incredibly obvious, right?
yeah,
It's like, how are people not seeing this? And sometimes the hardest part, actually, for Bitcoiners is to reconcile where they've gotten to compared to where the average person is right now, and sort of bridging
yeah,
that gap and speaking, meeting people where they are. And the longer you see it and the more you see people not being aware of it, the more frustrating it becomes, right? So,
yeah,
so you go through these, I've gone through these ebbs and flows where I've just become so frustrated where I'm like, what's the point? People don't want to understand, they don't want to
yeah,
learn. But I always revert back to, well, I'm trying to speak to them in a way that reflects my current understanding, which is
yeah,
many levels beyond where they currently are. And so, that sentence you said on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, where you're risk averse, you don't want to
yeah,
speculate in investments, you just want to own the money. I think the average person might not really comprehend where that comes from. So, to someone who knows there's a problem, feels there's a problem, is curious and is ready to kind of learn and understand, okay, well, where is this coming from and how can I fix it? Can you explain that sentence a bit, about what it means to just own the money and
yeah.
not speculate in investments?
Well, I got to be brutally honest, and I felt this especially. I have been pounding the table on Bitcoin for years to people in my real life, and then now I've been pounding the Bitcoin table for like 6 months or so online now. And and the feedback's been wonderful. Feedback's been so positive. But I just gotta be honest, and that some people are really dumb, and some people are really unintelligent, really arrogant, so stuff. It makes my blood boil because they are being so irresponsible
Mm.
on behalf of their clients, on behalf of their families, on behalf of their organizations. And frankly, that very small minority of people wears down my patience so much. But for myself, for you, and for everyone else watching who's trying to explain this, it's so important to emphasize that while those people exist, there are so many more people that are trying to understand and just they aren't there yet. And it's not
Yeah.
a lack of intelligence. It's not a lack of trying to understand. It's simply that they're trying to understand something that is the polar opposite of their entire worldviews that they've had for decades. And so my line is that if someone is aware about Bitcoin and they think it might be important and they have no curiosity to it and they're writing it off without paying, they're an idiot in my view. But if someone's actually asking questions
Yeah.
like the one you just asked and actually trying to learn, then I think that they'll but hopefully they'll be fine. Hopefully they'll figure it out in time. But basically, we have to frame it from views of technology. That if I were to go back in time, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 24. So, if I were to go back to my 6-year-old self, even, or 5-year-old self, and explain what we're doing right now,
Mm.
like on this call, like I don't think I could. And that's my lifetime. I'm under 25. I mean, my grandmother is 90. I mean, she like I don't know how I would explain to her what I'm doing right now 70 years ago when she was
Yeah.
my age. I mean, I don't know how to do that. And my favorite metaphor is that the horse versus a locomotive. If if we were to go back in time, just 200 years, which again sounds like a long period of time to us because we're the modern era, quote unquote. But like 200 years is nothing at
It's a
any point in
blink.
history. It's a blink. And the only reason we think it's a long time is because we live in this weird period where technology has been escalating so quickly in relation to everything else. And so if we go back in time, a mere 200 years, twice the age of my grandmother's life, or twice the age of most people's grandparents' life, 2 or 3 times their age, how would we explain to them the locomotive? If all they've known is a horse, their parents knew the horse, their grandparents knew the horse, 50 generations ago, all they knew was a horse. I mean, literally from the time of the Romans and the Renaissance and every other point in history up until the locomotive, all we knew was that the horse was the best form of transportation. That's all we knew. And you really can't explain what a lifeless hunk of metal can do to someone that only has known metal as something that's in the ground that is too expensive to dig out. It's like it's not one thing that's impossible to understand. You're talking about like a dozen things that are impossible to understand
Right.
because it takes so much energy to get the material out of the ground. It takes so much energy to get the momentum going and to continue that momentum for a long distance. And then on top of that, it solves problems that don't even exist yet because people of that time, they don't have to go to university in another city. They don't have to do commerce and business with other nations across long distances of land. Like these problems don't even exist yet. And as the locomotive progresses, then these problems begin to arise, or take the national strategic perspective. It's like, why do you need to use a locomotive to transport giant, heavy artillery when that artillery doesn't even exist yet? And so that's the context I really want to say before I answer your question, that if someone's trying to learn and they haven't figured it out yet, like it's okay. If you're trying to learn, you're not dumb. The people aren't trying to learn. Those are the dumb people. You're one of the smart ones. And
Right.
believe me, there aren't a lot of you in the big scheme of things. But ultimately, that's what's hard to understand is that they're two competing paradigms. And so what is the paradigm we have now? What is the Bitcoin theoretical paradigm? And the problem of why people don't understand the Bitcoin paradigm is they don't understand the paradigm we're currently in.
Right.
The paradigm we're currently in, if I have my wallet on me, I might have some cash on me. It'd be funny if I do. No, I don't. Which I guess is fitting. But yeah, so like we have paper money, and that's the form of money we use. Money is information, and for money to have value, it has to be scarce. And so the only way for us to validate that scarcity is to entrust that scarcity with a small group of individuals that can enforce that. The United States government, right now, this period of history, is the strongest single entity on the face of the planet. And so they are the ones in charge of enforcing the scarcity of the US dollar, and all the other nations enforce their own scarcities with their own monies. And that's a good thing, because if they didn't, then the money would just, since it's information, would just explode, become infinitely abundant, and then you can't use it anymore. It becomes worthless. And so when you view money that way, it's just information, and that the government is just enforcing that scarcity, then you have to ask the question, why are they loosening that scarcity every single year at a 2% target? Really, it's higher than that. It's probably going to be higher than that for many more years. And then it's probably just going to continue after that. But why are they doing that? Because credit functions it's borrowing today for the future, and it's easier to just make the money worth less into the future because it makes it easier to pay back. When the United States government borrows money to create things to give its voters, when we're printing money, aka printing energy, aka distorting that information and making it more abundant and diluting our money, that's how we're paying for all these goods and services and promises to voters that we couldn't otherwise do.
And to the average person, all they're seeing is this government is promising and giving me something, right?
Yes.
Well, like when they don't understand the consequences of, if they don't understand the mechanics of how this thing works, they don't see the consequence that, oh, geez, I got this thing, but now all the money I own and all the things I own that are denominated in the money just got devalued. If they don't see that part, all they're seeing is, I'm getting this thing, I'm going to vote for this person. And so it's almost like the lack of monetary literacy is what allows people to be manipulated in a way that they don't even know what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's the United States government exploiting the short-term mindset of everyone on the planet. And in them exploiting that, they're actually escalating the short-term mindset. I hear boomers all the time. Why are you young people don't think so long-term future? It's like, well, there's a lot. It's a feedback loop that the more the government exploits the people, the less rational the people become, which means that they vote less rational people in the government, which means it's less rational. It's just, it continues down and down and down forever. And that's exactly what we see in hundreds of historical examples. You have all this innovation based on technology, and as all this prosperity comes, human arrogance, again, sin, again, corruption, we think that we can print energy out of nothing. And so we do. And that incentivizes shorter term mindset. That incentivizes bad food production. That incentivizes corrupt education. That incentivizes less affordable medical care. That incentivizes insanity and disincentivizes sanity in the entire society subtly and mostly in the future. So by the time we get there, we don't realize that the problem was already there for years or decades. It's just been brewing for all that time. And so, and then it's a feedback loop, and it just continues down until the insanity has to reset, and then it comes up again from the ashes, and then you get a new society. And so that's a really big problem. And so what have we done to counteract that problem? What are we doing right now to counteract that problem? When you can't trust that money to retain its value in the future, you have to buy things that have that scarcity there. Because if you can't trust the money to be scarce over a long period of time, you have to buy things that are scarce. And right now, what are the main things we buy? Bonds, real estate, stocks. And so that's what most people will save in. Most retirees in America, those are the three main things they have. They have a 60-40 allocation, 60%, 40% portfolio between stocks and bonds. And then they have their house too, typically. Or perhaps there's some people that have much higher percentages to one thing or another. Perhaps some people have alternative assets like fine art or gold, things like that. But one way or another, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to buy things that have a brute force physical cost to create, meaning they're very difficult to create. It's very difficult to make more gold. It's very difficult to make more real estate. We can do that, but it's much more difficult to do that than, say, a company dilute their stock or a government dilute their currency. And so that's what we're trying to do. And what is considered low risk right now is to diversify among a whole lot of different things that have that high brute force physical cost and enforce that scarcity. So, let's say you're trying to save for your future, and you're not trying to get rich, you're just trying to save for your future. What you do is you take your earnings, you take your monetary energy that you've saved up from working, and you deploy it in all these different things, and you diversify so that no matter what happens, no matter how far the currency is diluted, or no matter what kind of economic turmoils head your way, you're probably going to own something that's probably going to at least retain some of its value. And most people don't think that way. What most people think is they think, I go to a job, I get my money, I put my money in the stock market, and the stocks go up in value because the economy is getting more valuable. And it's like, yes, that's true. But if the economy is getting more valuable, prices would come down, not go up. And that's what people miss. They think the S&P 500 has doubled over the last 10 years. So that means the economy's gotten twice more valuable. It's like, no, that's not what's happened. The amount of currency has gone up because when things become more productive, they get cheaper in terms of that currency. But we think they become more valuable because GDP gets more valuable, whatever. It's like that's not true. You have X number of currency units and you're enforcing that scarcity. The more abundance you have in society, or let's say priced in terms of that currency, the prices would come down. They won't go up. It's this subtle psychological trick that everyone believes, and it's simply wrong. It's simply not true. You don't create wealth by adding more zeros to numbers. You don't do that. And yet people think they're making money because we're adding more zeros. And the harsh realization, once you have that, is how do we transition from one to the other? How do we transition from a system that depends on adding new zeros for the government to afford itself and for these assets and securities and these business models to not collapse, when at the same time it's completely devoid from reality? And that's the transition we're in right now. That's why things feel so weird right now. That's why bonds since 2020 have been in such turmoil. I would argue that's a big part of why Russia is invading Ukraine. I would argue that's a big part of why, when it comes to health issues, when everything else we're mentioning, it's like, why does everything feel like it's getting so weird? It's because reality and delusion are in this head-on collision right now. And it's just beginning, but that collision is only going to get more paramount over the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years. And if people are not paying attention to that and trying to understand this conflict, then they're going to be fully positioned on the wrong side. And the implications here, and I know this is a long answer, but I'm just laying out the whole case here. But
I like it.
yeah, but the implications, like, we have lived in a world where the money is bad. And so what we have to do to counteract that is we have to save in things that are forms of less bad money. Gold is a form of less bad money than cash. Real estate is too. Stocks are too. And so because the money's bad, we have to save in less bad assets. But what happens when the money becomes good? What happens when you have good money? Well, now the assets are bad. And so right now we are transitioning from the old world of scarcity, where there's a scarcity of assets in relation to the money, and therefore you save in assets so you have more money in the future, to where now we're transitioning to hyperabundance and scarcity of money, to now where you don't want assets, you want the money. And so the painful realization people are going to have in this transition cost is simply that they have been saving for years and years, and for older people, decades, in assets and stocks, CDs, mutual funds, bank notes, real estate, gold, whatever. And now everything is going to start coming down on real terms all at once. And they're not going to understand that that's happening because the dollar denominated price is going up, and Bitcoin will go up in relation to everything else, and everything will just collapse in terms of Bitcoin. And it's going to be very painful for people. It's going to be very uncomfortable. And the best thing someone can do is just get off zero with the Bitcoin allocation in case that theory is correct. They don't have to go all in. They don't have to get 100% allocation. They just need some reasonable allocation that they can buy and put in proper storage, let it sit there and not worry about it, not freak out at night about it, not panic sell it when it goes down 50%, and not buy it thinking they're a genius when it goes up by 500%. That's what people should be doing. Yeah, most people aren't doing that because they're too scared, and because they don't understand what's happening, and because they're viewing risk incorrectly. It is correct to view the way most people are viewing risk right now is correct in the former worldview. But the problem is that if the worldview changes, your entire view of risk also has to change. And most people's view of risk is not going to change because that's mostly an emotional feeling. It's not logical. And I would argue that, as offensive as it seems, as counterintuitive as it seems, as ridiculous as it seems, the lowest risk thing on planet Earth right now for any time horizon in the future any reasonable time horizon future, let's say, is Bitcoin. I would argue Bitcoin is already lower risk than bonds, lower risk than stocks, lower risk than real estate. And people, that's when their eyes glaze over. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're high, you're whatever. And it's like, I'm saying that now so that in 5 years, when you start to consider, maybe Luke is right, then it'll click. Because if I tell you, oh, Bitcoin's going to go up, it's like, it won't click. But I'm saying that now because most people don't realize that. Most people think that they will buy Bitcoin when they finally want to get in and get rich quick. No, no. You're going to buy Bitcoin when you start to freak out because you
Yes.
realize everything else is about to fall 90% in value in the next 6 months, and then 90% again in the 4 months after that, and then 90% again in the 3 months after, forever. That's what's happening now. And to a much slower degree, but that's more or less essentially what's happening, that we're leaving this world of scarcity and abundant money, and we're entering this world of hyperabundance and scarce money. And probably what's going to happen is Bitcoin's going to double and double and double and double. And then people will begin to freak out because they'll realize, wait a minute, Bitcoin is money. And if it is money, and if it is good money, wow, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Garbage political currency units. The garbage man is here to take them out to slaughter, I guess. But anyway, that's what I mean. That saying that people within the worldview of diversification view these Bitcoiners that are taking extremely high allocations to Bitcoin as delusional and as extremely high risk. And they're right from their worldview. They're right. You don't take that high allocation in one scarce asset, because when the money's bad, you diversify into many scarce assets. But when you view from the Bitcoin world and you realize that this money is good, and if the money is good, all assets become high risk. And when you're diversifying into garbage. You know, why would you hold a portfolio of stocks, real estate, and bonds when Bitcoin is simply, when all those things will simply go down in terms of Bitcoin in the next 6 months, in the next 6 years, and the next 60 years? Why would you hold anything else that has higher risk? You know, with Bitcoin, it's virtually indestructible because it's digital. That's the irony. It's virtually indestructible. In the same way that the whole world is going to defend the internet, or the whole world is going to defend the Bible, or the whole world is going to defend the Constitution. The whole world will defend that information. They will copy it, they will duplicate it, they will save it indefinitely, forever. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. You know, with stocks, you're taking on dozens of kinds of risk. With bonds, you're taking on fewer kinds of risk, but much higher forms of risk. With real estate, you're taking on all kinds of risk. And we can make more real estate. We can make more companies that produce more value for the world at lower and lower margins indefinitely. And with Bitcoin, you can't do that. It's designed. It is designed to be anti-fragile. It is designed to resist duplication. It is designed to reject all future dilution of its money. And that's what makes it better money. And so I've really gone on and on here. But I guess my message to people is that what I just said, you know, for Bitcoiners, they probably understand what I'm saying right now, more or less. But well, actually, not necessarily. A lot of them don't understand that yet, which is the funny thing. I would argue of all the Bitcoiners that own Bitcoin, you know, maybe 10 to 20% actually understand what I'm saying right now. But for the people listening that don't yet understand it, it's like, if you just take what I said and you let that mull in your mind for 2 to 5 years, it'll make sense. And then you'll panic sell everything else for Bitcoin as soon as you realize that. And then you'll start becoming like me and just start pounding the table to everyone you know. And you'll wonder, how can they not see it? Because you've changed your worldview and they haven't yet. But even if you don't understand that yet, it's like, you know, I'm begging people to take a 3 to 5% allocation, you know, or whatever percent allocation they can justify, and buy Bitcoin and just let it sit there and forget about it. And the younger people should have a higher allocation to Bitcoin. Most financial advisors will say, oh, because you mean that younger people should have a higher risk tolerance. It's like, no, because the younger people are higher risk than the old people. You know, we're leaving the worldview where the older people have high risk, and now we're entering the world where the young people have high risk, because they're going to face more technological adoption curves. And so it's like, yes, I think everyone should have an allocation of Bitcoin, but retirees need it, young people need it, and young people should probably have a higher allocation because they're going to have even, you know, right now, by the time someone's 50 or 60, they're having difficulty keeping up with technology. My generation, by the time we're 40, we'll have trouble keeping up. And my kids, maybe by the time they're 30, we'll have trouble keeping up. I mean, it's it's hard to say. We really don't know, but that seems to be the direction things are going. But even if you're just in retirement, or you're very risk averse, like I would strongly encourage you get an allocation, because if this theory is right, it sounds fringe, it sounds ridiculous. If it's correct, then Bitcoin is the lowest risk asset on the planet, and everything else is extremely high risk all of a sudden. So anyway,
Yeah.
hopefully I went on a long time about that. So sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like it's a tricky question to answer because you
Yeah.
can either give some superficial um, answer that doesn't have a lot of meaning, or you can
Yeah.
actually build it from first principles and give a rational sort of build the rational case
Yeah.
for why that is true. And I think, I just look at my parents who are both boomers, and they've believed their entire life that real estate is a safe investment. And actually, all of their experience in their entire lives has reflected that as a fundamental truth. And so for me, someone who's younger than them and who can't possibly know as much about the world as them because they've lived longer, chronologically, they've spent more time on Earth. It's a very, the cognitive dissonance of them having to come to terms with the fact that everything they think they know about money is actually wrong, and that they've been misled at an increasing pace, and that everything they've saved in their lives is becoming exponentially more quickly at risk, is a hard sell. And so I think it's kind of like, it's very similar to health. People either learn, or change is hard, massive change is very hard. And the only way they're going to do it is, I think there's only two routes. The vastly uncommon route is curiosity. The vastly common route is pain. And people will only change. They have a high amount. If something is really hard to do, like if it's really hard to make these massive changes in how you see the world, and the difficulty is not actually so much in the learning, it's actually mostly in the unlearning. It's in the admitting that you're wrong. They'll learn through pain. Like you said, when they see all of their things that they own that they thought were less risky to own collapsing in value, relative to Bitcoin, relative to scarce assets, then they start to switch. And I think part of the mission, at least for me, part of my motivation is how many people who have some semblance of that curiosity can I help? Like, how many people's socioeconomic lives can I help before it's too late? And at a certain point, we have to conserve our energy. It's like, it's not worth. I'm not trying to convince anyone that Bitcoin is what it is anymore. All I want to do is meet people where they are who have expressed curiosity and actually want to do the work to learn, and make sure that they know where to go based on where they're at and what they're willing to kind of look into and change right now. And we live in a landscape where there's more resources and more voices that are explaining this in different ways than ever before. And so it's almost like, okay, if I can be this like database of things I've learned from, tools I've learned from at different stages, and make sure that the right person meets the right resource based on where they're at, that's the game now. And it's actually a lot of fun now that I'm not trying to butt heads with people and change people's minds. I'm just trying to make sure that someone who wants to spend time learning has that time well spent. They don't get lost. They don't get sucked into the black hole of crypto and, all of this stuff. It's really just, how do we help people educate themselves?
Yeah.
And those who are most curious, and those who do discover it through curiosity, like I got insanely lucky and discovered Bitcoin, started learning about Bitcoin in 2016 just through curiosity. And it's been the deepest and most vast rabbit hole I've ever gone down in my life, but it has actually exponentially improved my life in areas far beyond any realm I could have imagined, right? Like my curiosity for human psychology and for economics and for even politics. Like, how does this work? Why is it designed this way? Who pulls the strings? Like, why do these things happen? It just really, it's like the best degree you can ever get is a self-directed degree in Bitcoin, because it actually covers almost every area. It's hard to find an area of study that Bitcoin doesn't touch in some way if you're in it for long enough.
No, I get it. I've talked, and perhaps this might ruffle some feathers, but one of the most frustrating things to me is talking to a PhD, whether it's in person or online, and they say things that are just not true, and they are so ignorant that they are sure they're smart.
Yep.
And they are just sure I'm wrong. I think I'm right. I think there's a possibility I'm wrong, but it's like, with something you were saying earlier, it's like some people, and again, I'm not wanting to say everyone that's against Bitcoin falls in this category. However, this, it's significant, but these people are so arrogant, and I understand why they think that way, because like you said, they've been reinforced for decades to think that they're right. You mentioned real estate. They're they think real estate goes up in value. They're so sure, and and like what you're saying, the curiosity versus comfort. That's the irony. But the people in charge of money, the people in charge of managing money, have been trained for thousands of hours to think a certain way. And they've seen that worldview been reinforced in their mind for thousands of hours more, for
Hmm.
decades. And these younger people are coming in, these outliers are coming in, and they're doing these ridiculous things. MicroStrategy. People think Michael Saylor is crazy because he has taken his entire company and he has bet it all on Bitcoin. He sold
Yep.
all of his stock, put it in Bitcoin. He raised debt, put it all in Bitcoin. Didn't diversify, all in, all Bitcoin, smash buy. No dollar cost average, no limiting of leverage. Like it's completely nonsensical. And the fact that his company's value's gone up by factor, or his enterprise value's gone up by factor, like these people don't understand it, because these outsiders, it doesn't matter if they're rich and older, it doesn't matter if they're young and more broke like me. They think we're crazy. And it frustrates me. Like I said, it causes me to lose patience, but I understand because they've been trained to think that way. And the frustrating thing for me, for the people in the middle, for the people that simply don't know any better out of ignorance, and haven't done the thinking, haven't done the work, they're going to get caught up in it, because those people, that arrogant subset, they will not learn this
And they have a lot
until,
of influence. That's the
and they have a
unfortunate thing.
lot of influence, and they will not learn this until their arrogance is collapsed into humility because of the pain, like you said, because they have no curiosity, and they will not learn this until the pain is so great for them personally that they will learn this. They will lose all their clients' money. They will go bankrupt before they learn this. And that's what people today don't understand. That it's like this.
And they'll probably blame Bitcoin for them going bankrupt.
They will blame Bitcoin. That's exactly what they will do. You're exactly right. That's exactly what they will do. It's like again, this isn't. I don't want to make this about them because I'm just as far as them, but it's about technological paradigms. If you have horse breeders that for thousands of years have been taught how to breed horses, generation after generation after, this is just what we do. This is how we make a better horse, a better,
Yep.
beautiful horse, a faster horse, or whatever horse, or more horses. It's like this is what we do. And you have all these locomotive lunatics coming in saying that this lifeless hunk of metal is going to move. Okay, that's crazy. It's going to move faster than the horse. That's crazy. For a longer distance, that's crazy. Moving more weight, that's crazy. And eventually be cheaper, that's crazy. And oh, that's not the final form. Because even the people that are promoting the locomotives in the early 19th century, they don't understand the car, they don't understand the spaceship, they don't understand the satellite, they don't understand all these other things, or the internet, which is perhaps even more difficult to understand than a satellite. Um, it's like the we're here today in the early 2020s, pounding the table on the locomotive, saying this is going to obliterate your business model. And the horse people are saying, oh, you're speculating, you're in this high risk thing, you don't know what you're talking about. Horses are never going to go away, blah blah blah. Horses are lower risk. You got to diversify, with your stallions and your mares and all this and whatever, and your colts. It's like it's complete nonsense. You're diversifying into inferior pieces of technology that, as soon as the masses realize is inferior, it's like it's completely gone. And these people are so arrogant that they're not even willing to look in the general direction of the locomotive, that by the time it becomes apparent to all society, it will have already happened. And so anyway, all I say is like, your point about curiosity versus arrogance is so true. I don't think that's just a fitness thing. I think that, I think it's a fitness thing. I don't think it's a Bitcoin thing. I think it's just a general human thing. For whatever reason, I was lucky enough to be curious to discover Bitcoin. I'm not lucky for buying it early, like we are now. I'm lucky that I was curious to pay attention and buy it. If I was a couple years older, I probably would have been too arrogant, and I probably would not have paid attention because I would have thought I was smart. But that's the unfortunate reality right now, that there's a small subset of the population that is extremely stubborn and extremely arrogant. There's a much smaller percentage population that's extremely curious. And then most people in the middle are caught between the two and they don't know which to believe. And the unfortunate reality is that most people are going to get blindsided. And again, they will come to Bitcoin when their pain point is crossed, and they're they won't come to Bitcoin when they're excited about Bitcoin. They will come to Bitcoin when they're terrified of owning anything else. And that's what's going to happen. And I say that so definitively because I'm that confident. Bitcoin's going to start going up. It's not going to come down. And people are going to ask us, you and me, the people that were ignoring us, they're going to be like, hey, should I buy some? It's like we'll be like shaking them. Like anyway,
Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. I think there's so
yeah,
much baked into that small
yes,
sentence that I think reflects fundamental truths. And I think there's a difference, and it's a subtle difference, but it's very important, between being very confident about something because you simply understand the
yes,
underpinnings of why
yes,
that thing is the way that you view it, and then being certain about
yes,
something, because you can be highly confident about something but still flexible in your thinking to be open to be proven wrong,
definitely,
or
yeah,
you can be insanely rigid and certain. And in a time where things are changing faster than ever, in bigger ways than ever, the cost of rigidity is getting extremely high, to the point where like your life can actually be the consequence of being too rigid, right? It's like adapt or die has never held more true than now.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, it's just like, it's almost like, instead of trying to teach people about Bitcoin, how can we inspire them to be curious and
yeah,
open-minded enough to even just hear a perspective with good faith, instead
yeah,
of prejudging it because everything that they've learned to date says that that's false? It's like, well, can you just be a bit curious and just hear me out and entertain this?
yeah,
I think that's almost the fundamental ask, is like, can you be curious enough to be open-minded that the way you're thinking about things could be wrong? And here's like my approach from first principles about why I feel this way. Let's have a dialogue about it. I'm not just going to yell at you and say buy Bitcoin. I want you to understand money so that you can see for
yeah.
yourself that the only path forward is Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, the idea is that I think actually most pain will not be from people that don't buy Bitcoin. I think most of the pain would be from people that buy and then sell. Like,
Mm.
okay, right now Bitcoin's
Yeah.
$30,000. Let's say I convince somebody to buy a whole Bitcoin today at $30,000. Okay. Let's say they hold it for 5 years. It goes up to $150,000. Then they sell it. They think they're a genius because they made a 500% return. They've smashed Wall Street. Oh my goodness, they're so smart. Blah, blah, blah. It's like they're still viewing it from the old world view. They're
Yeah.
still viewing Bitcoin as a means to get more dollars. In the same way you view real estate and stocks to get more dollars. And you're even person that didn't buy it in a way, respectfully speaking. It's because you bought it, you did the work, you made it 99 yards to the touchdown line, and you fumbled and you missed it because you bought it 30K, you sold at 150K, and then Bitcoin went to 800K, and then 8,000K, and then 8 million K
Right.
eventually in the far future. And it's like, and it's anyway, I think that's where most pain comes from. It's like, imagine buying Bitcoin in 2012 at $11 and then selling it at 1,000. It's like, okay, you made $1,000, but now Bitcoin's 30 grand and it's like depths of the bear market. Okay, what about when Bitcoin's $10 million? It's like, you're going to feel smart then. I mean, I think that's when a lot of the pain's going to come. I think most pain's not going to come when people have it about Bitcoin. I think it's going to come when people buy it, they sell it for massive profit, and then that's it. But yeah, what one thing I want to say too, and something you said made me think of this, but I want to emphasize, um, too that the difference between Bitcoiners that come across as very arrogant, and many of them are very arrogant, versus traditional finance people, is that the Bitcoiners are paying attention to the strengths and weaknesses of the legacy financial system. And the legacy financial system is paying zero attention to Bitcoin. That's the
Mm.
difference. It's like someone promoting the locomotive, saying this thing is going to be a really big deal. Right now, the horse is faster. Right now, the horse is cheaper. Right now, this and that, the other. Yes, but the locomotive still is going to completely obliterate them for this and that, the other reason. And that's why right now is the perfect time to transition before it becomes apparent and obvious to everyone. And what the horse people are doing is they're saying, or they're not even saying anything. They're just not looking at it.
Yeah, they're writing it off.
Yeah, they're completely writing it off. And that's the difference. That the Bitcoiners I talk to can explain the bond market and the banking system better than the people in the bond market and the banking system. Like
That's a really good point.
I've talked to financial advisors that understand Bitcoin and don't understand Bitcoin. Like, yeah, it's frustrating because a lot of people that don't understand Bitcoin, they won't go on a show with me because I just want to record it and I don't shame people. I just let them talk, and their ignorance and people, their ignorance becomes obvious just from them talking. I don't have to probe. I don't have to do anything. It becomes obvious. They have no idea what they're talking about. When it comes to the traditional market, not even Bitcoin, when it comes to traditional, they don't know what they're talking about. And it like things that are not a matter of opinion, things are a matter of fact. They don't know how these things happen. They don't know how these things transpire. All they know are the bullet points of what we talked about. That you DCA, you buy in this basket, this and that, the other, and you do this and that, the other, 4% rule, 60-40 portfolio, Sharpe ratio, blah, blah. They know the talking points, but they don't know the engineering. They don't know the mechanics under it. And so that's the difference. You know, if you have two worldviews, one worldview understands both and is hardcore in one worldview and promoting it, and the other one understands the current worldview pretty well, but not as well as they should, and they have no idea how the other worldview even works. It's like, to me, that alone should be emphasis enough of what direction you should lean. And most people right now, most people saving for retirement, or most, you know, people with a portfolio right now are all in one worldview. They're all in traditional worldview.
Yeah.
And that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how the people who talk about diversification and its values like aren't diversified in worldviews at all. Like,
well, that's the thing. If you're diversified between stocks and bonds and cash, you know, and real estate, you're diversified between fiat systems or within fiat systems. It's like saying you're diversified between, you know, it's like saying you're diversified between, it's like owning all the houses in a neighborhood and saying you're diversified. It's like, sure, you kind of are, but, you know, what if that neighborhood goes down in value? What if that zip code goes down in value? It's like you're diversified within a very narrow window, and that's the problem most people have. So
anyway. Yeah, it's like if you were diversified in the size and look of Yapstones, you didn't do very well in the end, right? Because it's all the same shit.
Yeah, it's all the same.
And I love how, like, we're really, part of the paradigm shift, I think, is from this mindset of currency, like politically engineered units of let's call it quote unquote money, to engineered money, right? And I love what Saylor says too. He's like, if you go to an engineer and you say, hey, you're building your planes out of aluminum right now, I think you should diversify and use different metals. It's like, no. We make the airplane out of aluminum because that's the only metal that can do the job. Everything else falls apart. And, you know, I think
there's no second best. There's no second best, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, it really is it can be and even have a personal story about this from very recently. I had like a family dinner with my partner's family, and her aunt is an accountant, like a fairly high level accountant, works at a big firm, very smart lady, been working with money her whole life, like has been a career accountant and is very high level in the firm that she works in. And, you know, she kind of asked, you know, what do you do? What work do you do? And I said that most of what I do is to work in financial literacy now, specifically help people understand Bitcoin. And she kind of just shrugged it off. I was like, oh, you're one of those. Like, I think she just thought I was a crypto bro the minute I said that. And I just kind of looked at her and I said, can I ask you a question? You've worked in money your entire life. Would you call yourself an expert on money? And it was kind of like, yes.
Yes.
And I just asked her one question. What is money? And she looked at me and was quite confused. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't have an answer. And I saw her a follow-up time.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
The problem is not even that she didn't answer it. The problem is that she hasn't ever thought about it. That's the problem. It's okay if you don't have the answer, but you've not even thought about the question.
Yes. And the next time I saw her, I said, you know what? I want to ask you this question again. And she looked at me, she was shaking her head. She's like, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I don't know yet. And I was like, wow. Not only, it's like the discomfort of not understand, not being able to define something that you've spent your whole life working on is so uncomfortable that you haven't even leaned in a tiny bit to even try to define that, despite clearly thinking about it and knowing I was going to ask you again. So I think that it was just a prime example of rigidity, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable in my current way of viewing the world. I've been in this world far longer than you. You can't possibly know more than me. Therefore, I'm not even going to entertain
Yeah.
the idea of trying to answer this question, which seems so abstract, despite me working in this world for my entire life and not even being able to define
Yeah.
the term of the things I'm working with. And it just reminded me of that old saying where there's like two young fish and there's one old fish, and the old fish says, hey guys, how's the water? And the two fish look at each other and they're like, what is water? Because they're in it. They don't even know that it's a
That's
thing
good.
because they're just in it. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the a really good metaphor for where we're at right now, where
Yeah.
it's like, when you ask people what is money, what makes money, what makes the piece of paper in your hand better money than the apple I have in my hand.
Yeah.
And most people haven't even gone through the exercise of really like, yeah, why is that? Because they intuitively, like, when you really get them along this path of thinking, they intuitively know some things. It's like, well, I can't use the apple to pay for something. It's like, okay, why won't people accept the apple as payment? And so you see the things, the curious
Yeah.
people will kind of be like, yeah, why? I've never asked myself that.
Or
Why
gold.
is that?
Why did people pick gold?
Right.
When you understand money, it becomes obvious why you picked gold.
Yes.
If you don't understand money, it's like gold's random. Why is gold value? Well, intrinsic value. It's like, no, not intrinsic value. It fits a set of criteria the best. And if you don't know what the criteria is,
Right.
you just make up something like intrinsic value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of lean on a
Yeah.
piece of jargon that you think will
Yeah.
give you a pass.
We give it jargon.
Yeah.
And then you ask people, what does that jargon mean? They don't even know. So
Yep.
anyway, I think we kind of hammered the point home. I guess something to make it more practical for people is that, I was a little too young to really remember 2008 financial crisis, but a lot of people remember that. And really, fundamentally, what was 2008? 2008 was an unwind of bad, insane, nonsensical debt that we had in mortgages. Not all mortgages, but a lot of mortgages that had built up over a few years, decade or so, whatever, a couple decades, maybe even. It's all definitions, how long you want to define it. But what was 2008? 2008 was an unwind of the credit system that lasted, however long, a year, just over a year, until we injected a bunch of liquidity with TARP and QE and bailouts or everything of that sort. And society was really mad at the bailouts. But what would we have done without the bailouts? The deflation would have continued. The unwind would have continued. And it's like, that's why all this yelling at the government for these bailouts is really pointless. Like, okay, you can yell at them. What's the other option?
Yeah.
We don't want the other option because the pain is so high. We will prefer the pain of bailing out the capitalists, of bailing out the businessmen, of bailing out the politicians. We prefer that pain to the pain of deflation because we have propped ourselves up. We have leveraged ourselves so much up on insanity and delusion that we don't want to come back to truth. We're like a drug addict that is mad that our drug dealer is skimping a little off the top. It's like, okay, what's the other option? You're not going to take the drug? No, we'll keep taking the drug, and we'll keep taking the drug until we overdose.
Right.
And that's all the Bitcoiners are saying. So it's like, if you remember 2008, okay, what the Bitcoiners are saying is not, oh, the housing market's about to crash like I did in 2008. It's like, no, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is the drugs have continued, the drugs will continue, and the drugs will not stop until we are forced via our overdose to come back to reality.
Yeah.
And the same way that things began deflating in 2008, imagine that 6-month period, every 6 months, and every 6 months was faster than the last 6 months, continually, forever. And we view that with the old worldview lens, and we think it's a bad thing because you remember the fear and the panic and the paranoia of that period. But if you view it from the new world, that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing when insanity goes down. It's a good thing when the ability to stimulate goes down. It's a good thing when things become cheaper. It's not a good thing when things become more expensive. And we're so hooked on delusion, we're so hooked on the drugs that we think that's a good thing. It's like, it's a good thing when housing becomes more cheaper. It's a good thing when food prices go down. It's a good thing when energy prices, because that means that there's more of everything. People in the developing world, they need more stuff. And when things become cheaper, when stuff becomes cheaper, they can have more of it. And so, and I really want to make that clear too, because I think a lot of the people in the current worldview think that the Bitcoiners are like some of these gurus online that are saying, oh, we're about to have a new Great Depression, or oh, stocks are about to crash, or oh, whatever. And we're trying to time the market, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is a completely new thing. This is not going to be like 2008. 2008 was a brief few month period where we got a taste in one housing market in one country of what deflation would feel like for a credit market.
Yeah,
When
like
there
we
was
started
no,
to get a bit of withdrawal. We got the feeling of
yes,
what the peak of
that,
withdrawal feels like, and then we just inject it again to try and get
yes,
rid of the pain.
yes, that's what withdrawal feels like. And people ask me, what's this venture going to look like? It's going to feel like that on steroids.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like that on steroids. But the beautiful thing is that there's a way to opt out of the insanity. And that's people, most people will not adopt Bitcoin until they have that full withdrawal feeling like they did in 2008. They're going to look at their house. They're going to look at their retirement portfolio. They're going to walk in their financial advisor. They're going to, in the same way that when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, it goes down like 20-30% value. That's what it's going to feel like for everything. A car is a consumer good. A house is a consumer good. And because we rely on a credit system, we think that one goes up and the other goes down. It's completely nonsensical. A house goes down in value just like the car. We can make more cars. We can make more houses. Granted, we make houses a little slower than we make the cars. But the only reason the houses don't go down is because we keep propping it up with forever longer mortgages, with forever lower interest rates, with forever more insanity. And we simply can't keep it up forever because reality always wins out. And that's what the people in The Big Short were betting on. They were betting on that the reality is going to win out sometime in the near future because this is too insane. And they were right. Reality won out. We began to come back down to reality. And then, because we had the ability to, we created the delusion. We extended the delusion. And right now, the ability for us to extend the delusion is a lot lower than it was then. People trust the government a lot less now than they did then. In 5 years, 10 years, they're going to trust the government even less, most probably, I think.
And we actually have an exit from the delusion for the first time, like
well,
a
yeah.
mature, before it was like, it could be, it could not be, it could work, it
Well,
could
that's
not
the
work. And
difference.
now,
Yeah,
yeah,
but before, what's your other option?
right.
Before, what's your other option? But now you have the option, and that makes all the difference. When you don't have any other option besides the US dollar, it's like, well, I guess that's what I'll use. But now you have that option, and people, uh, many people are leaving for that new option. And when that hits critical mass, like it's just that's when you get hyperdeflation. And that's I made my point, but yeah, that's the long story short. That Bitcoin will continue to be a curiosity and an oddity, and then suddenly, maybe over the course of a decade, maybe over the course of weeks, who knows? But over the course of a blip in the grand scheme of things, it will go from being viewed as a curiosity, risk speculation of people trying to get rich quick or whatever, taking extremely high risk. That's just for young people, extreme speculators. To suddenly, I want a 90% allocation to Bitcoin and I want it yesterday. How do I sell everything as fast as I possibly can?
Yeah.
And anyway, that it's when that happens, you better do it quick because everyone else is gonna, anyway. Yeah, I think we made that point. I think I've gone enough about that.
I'd be really curious just on a, like, personally for yourself, because I know for me, there's been times where I found it kind of hard to actually, it's like it becomes very difficult to be a sane person in
Yeah.
an increasingly insane world. And I think at times I've felt very alone, because it's like there's like a frustration and then a loneliness associated with seeing something other people don't see and don't want to see, and will actually just shit on you for seeing. um and I think that's part of why, like, these conversations, I always tell people talking to Bitcoiners is my antidepressant, because it's like, oh wow, someone else that is actually seeing the world rationally, can see the illusion for what it is without getting too roped into the the doomsday scenarios. Have you gone through ebbs and flows where you've kind of lost hope or felt lonely, or I'd love to hear just if you've gone through those, because you've kind of been going at warp speed since your first podcast,
Yeah.
since that first thread. I'd love to know what that journey's been like, and just emotionally, how has the surf been? What kind of waves have you been riding? Because I know for me, it's been very. I've sort of, I guess my biggest lesson is I've learned that focusing my energy on what matters and not getting
Yeah.
distracted with the unlimited amounts of distractions that are out there, and finding people who I can relate to in terms of my value and having real human conversations with meaningful relationships. That's literally the only thing that I've been able to fall back on that has made me not feel as crazy or as sad about the state of the world. So how's it been for you so far?
Yeah, it's changed everything. I mean, I went, from before Twitter, I family, friends, coworkers, whatever, that were kind of curious what I was saying, but weren't, it's like, it's fine. Like I said, the only thing that really irritates me is people don't want to listen at all. Um, because it's like before this, I never really, I was never a big meme stop guy. I never was like, oh, you gotta buy this, or whatever. And so it's like, people I know that know I'm smart, hear me pounding the table on this thing, and it's like they're not paying attention to it. It's like, okay, like the story I tell people about how I had an acquaintance who I knew was very intelligent, and I knew he was like all in Bitcoin. I was like, okay, wait a second. That's such a bold, extreme thing.
Yeah.
Either I'm wrong about his intelligence or I'm wrong about this thing. And that's really what helped incentivize me to begin or continue learning, really go into overdrive. And so that was very frustrating. Not even so much people to understand Bitcoin, but that people I knew that knew me to be intelligent were hearing me pound the table on this thing and only pound the table on this thing. Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin for years. And, you know, like we've been saying, curiosity is not there. And,
Mm.
they'll I mean, I don't say this out of enjoyment, but they'll pay the price for that, and the price will be they'll get less satoshis and we'll get less Bitcoin for it. They'll watch the value of everything that they've owned and worked for the last 40 years. That's the funny thing. If you spend 40 years in a career and everything you own goes down 90% relative value versus Bitcoin, okay, you just lost 36 years. I mean, kind of your fault, but ultimately life's more than money, but that's your responsibility for losing a third of a century. But yeah, so anyway, going from that worldview where I had that frustration to all of a sudden where now I get messages every single day from people saying that I've helped them so much or that I gave a new perspective. Even before we were talking on the call, it's like it just means so much. So yeah, ebbs and flows, but I think definitely putting my energy into places where people are actually trying to learn or genuinely debate me. Like I'm thrilled with that. I love it when people debate me. Like I am hungry for people that have different worldviews that aren't writing me off as dumb simply because I'm young or simply because I'm whatever.
Mm.
Like to me, that is so much more rewarding than trying to shake people. And ultimately, giving up. Like that's one of the Twitter has kind of set me free from having the need to feel like I gotta save my friends and family and coworkers. Which, it's sad, but part of the freeing thing about posting my stuff online is that I don't feel the need to educate those people anymore. I know, like I said before, I know a lot of people that run organizations, churches, charitable missions. It's like, as much as I hate to say it, I don't feel the urge to educate them anymore because they're not going to learn. They don't want to learn.
Right.
And unfortunately, the people they serve will indirectly face consequences for that. But on Twitter, I can talk to people that do run organizations. I'm talking with the guy who's setting up a charity later this year. I'm talking with people that run missions all over the world, and I'm helping them understand why they need an allocation to Bitcoin, why they need to set up Bitcoin rails or whatever. And it's like, to me, it scratches that itch because the point us Bitcoiners right now is we're pounding the town or pounding the table on the locomotive. And so to be able to find people that actually are going to take what we say at least somewhat seriously and get off zero, like, yeah. So, but for many Bitcoiners, it's very lonely. Um, and I guess my encouragement to them would be just do your best, accept that most people be too arrogant, and find people that are interested. Because like, just give up. As brutal as that is, just give up on the people that don't care,
Yeah.
because
It's a
that
waste of energy, and you need
it's
to
a
conserve your energy.
it's a character flaw. Like I have my own flaws. I'm not saying a place of arrogance or virtue signaling. It's just true. I have my own
Yeah.
character flaws. One of my strengths is that I'm curious. For other people, they have many benefits I don't have, and I wished I had. But for some people, they just are too stubborn. They're too stubborn, or their ego is too large, or they're too distracted. Maybe it's not even arrogance or something more vile like that. Maybe they're just But whatever the case is, if you're watching us and you're trying to learn, learn from people that are willing to help educate you. And if you are trying to educate people, just give up on the people who don't want to learn. Like you're not going to do it. And you know, yeah. So
And I
so yeah,
think,
I've gone through those periods.
yeah, and I think there's an incredible one thing I've noticed amongst Bitcoiners from every perspective or who come from different backgrounds brought them to Bitcoin, but now they are, they understand Bitcoin and their mission seems to be to spread awareness. They put their energy towards helping other people understand it. I mean, just you showing up on this call today is the generosity of time and the willingness to explain things to people who actually show good faith curiosity. And, whether it's the person running the horse ranch that is like, can you tell me a little bit about this, steam engine? Like I've heard
Yeah,
this and, I kind of want to learn about it just in case
yeah,
it's something. Or whether it's someone who owns a horse ranch is like, hey, I just learned about the steam engine. It's blowing my mind. How do I get in on that? Like it seems
yeah,
really intimidating. I can't build my own.
yeah,
How do I go about it? And I think there's all these almost levels of readiness where people are, but I think the key is just the readiness and the willingness for them to take personal responsibility for learning about something, right? It's not do this for me. It's I want to learn more. Here's where I'm
yeah,
at. What's my next step? Because when I first started learning about Bitcoin, it was very like piecemeal. I would have to search really hard to find something that was good quality. Like Andreas
yeah,
Antonopoulos was literally this beautiful source of information that was just truth and honesty and just made really complex things very simple with
yeah,
beautiful metaphors. And yeah, just trying to be that person for the people who have expressed interest, I
yeah.
think is what motivates me.
Yeah,
Um,
and real quick, if someone's watching this, because I get this all the time, like, okay, Luke, that's great, and but what do I actually do? For those that maybe the message not come across, take a percentage allocation you can sleep with, buy the Bitcoin, store the Bitcoin properly, don't leave it on exchange for an extended period of time. Use an exchange at first if that's what you're more comfortable with, but don't leave it there. Store it properly, and then wait. It's that simple. We like to
yeah,
overcomplicate it as an excuse to not learn. It's
yes,
that simple. Take a percent you're happy with. Buy the Bitcoin, store the Bitcoin, leave it.
yes, that's
Yeah.
it. It's
Anyway,
that
anyway.
simple.
So yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. What else? What else are you to talk about?
I got two more things I want to talk about.
Sure.
I'd love to hear your perspective, even in just like 15 minutes on um, just the idea that global money based on energy isn't actually a new thing. Although the
Correct.
instantiation of it into reality and actually it being a real thing is relatively new. So I want to just pick your brain on, Ford and Tesla were onto this 100 years
Yes.
ago. What were they missing to be able to bring this into reality that Satoshi had available to him to allow him to do it in 2009? And then the last thing I want to talk about is your project that, your passion for filmmaking and the case for Bitcoin and, like just the why, how, what. I love that frame of questioning. It's like, why are you creating it? How has the process been so far? What's it about? And how could people sort of help or track your progress? So let's talk about global money based on energy first.
Sure.
So 1900, Ford talked about it. 1921, which I find the 21 there really curious.
Yeah, that's funny.
Tesla talked about it. So can you talk a little bit about what obstacles did Ford and Tesla have? What obstacles did they face to bring those thoughts into reality? And what is if Bitcoin is this beautiful tree that emerged out of a certain subset of conditions, what is the soil required for
Oh,
something like Bitcoin to emerge? What are the essential elements? Just like soil has these essential elements for a tree to actually have what it needs to grow. What was the soil required for Bitcoin to grow that Tesla and Ford didn't have that we now have? I've heard you talk about this a few times, but I'd love to hear you express it again because it is you do a very and it seems like your understanding of history is really what allows you to do these things, which I'm
curiosity.
just fascinated
Curiosity.
by. Yeah, yeah.
History was always a curious subject for me. It's like, like again, like I'm not looking for buying Bitcoin this early. I'm looking for being curious enough.
Mm,
History was a big part of that. But real quick, you got Ford and Tesla switch. Tesla was in 1900, Ford was in 21.
gotcha.
Buckminster Fuller was 1960, no, 1956, 1981, I think, or no, maybe 1986. Anyway, he predicted it multiple times, once in the 50s, 60s, once in the 80s, I think. Let's see who else. Milton Friedman predicted it. Hayek predicted it. Finney, of course. Back, of course. And there's like 3 or 4 more. I have a list. I lost it. I think I need to make it again. But anyway, there were like a dozen or so. There were many more that kind of predicted, but there were a dozen or so people in the 20th century or early 21st century that really predicted spot on. So what do they actually predict? Um, when I tell people that, they have trouble understanding. And when I tell people Bitcoin's inevitable, or when I tell people that these people predicted Bitcoin, both of those things they have trouble understanding. But again, we have to think of some technological paradigms. We have one paradigm now. All these people are envisioning was a different paradigm. And that their whole thesis was that this paradigm is what we have now and it works and it's what we need, but it cannot sustain forever. And eventually we'll have to upgrade. Really, that's not controversial. It's like the horse works, the horse is going to continue to work. We don't have the technology, but eventually we'll probably find a way to use steam or to use some other form of energy to create some form of locomotion. In some way we'll upgrade. Like that's all they were predicting. Tesla, Ford, they were basically saying that the world as it is now, this form of monetary energy cannot survive forever, and eventually we'll have to upgrade. So what are those different aspects that they predicted? And then why? Because once you understand that, you understand it's inevitable. That if humanity survives, we eventually will upgrade. Like it becomes inevitable. And then you can backtrack and understand Bitcoin is the most probable manifestation of that upgrade. So what did Tesla predict? What did Ford predict? What did these other predict? What Tesla predicted is basically this problem. I forget the name of the paper. It's like up problems upgrading, whatever. Shoot, I can't remember now. I'm looking it up. The Problem of Increasing Human Energy by Nikola Tesla, 1900, for reference, if people want to read it. The problem of increasing human energy. Okay, this is one of the problems he outlines. He outlines that our weapons will become so good, so massive, so destructible, and so powerful that they become ineffective as weapons. Okay, now he's predicting multiple things there. He's predicting the problem, and then he's predicting the solution. The problem being our weapons will just get better and better and better and better to the point where they're more or less useless. And at that point, they're more just threats than anything. That's the nuclear bomb, obviously, that we're referring to. And I would argue that whatever weapons we make here on after the nuclear bomb are going to be only more terrifying. The nuclear bomb is not the final form of this form of kinetic warfare. We'll only make more terrifying weapons this century. But that's the basic problem. That it becomes so expensive to wage war that we can't actually have these kinds of conflicts because controversy, war actually has positive results. Granted, we don't want it, it's negative, but why do we have war? We have war for self-defense. We have war for settling disputes when political regimes break down. Instead of having everything collapse, we just settle the war and get it over with, basically. So,
often wars are actually what shift paradigms, like what actually
yes,
reset things, recalibrate things.
Yeah, actually. So I'm not pro-war, obviously, but we have to admit that when you have weapons get to that point to where that is no longer possible, to where now you have no conflict, global destruction, and there's nothing in the middle, that's a huge problem. How do you settle brute force physical cost disputes via projecting power? This is the whole Jason Lowery thesis, which is really strange because Jason Lowery gets a lot of hate, but really he's just paraphrasing what Tesla said.
Right.
And so Tesla's point in 1900, increasing human energy, was that we have to find a way to project this power non-violently without killing each other. That's disputed. And so basically what he said is what he described is basically Bitcoin, a form of projecting power without violence that could settle these disputes globally without the need of screws, without the need of bloodshed. And it's basically a form of conserving energy. And he goes on, but basically he's predicting is Bitcoin. That eventually we would find weapons that are extremely destructive. Eventually, we would find a way to communicate energy across the world without wires. That's something else he predicted, by the way, the internet. He actually tried to make the internet too. That's something else people don't realize. He tried to make it. He ran out of funding, but he tried to make the internet. He failed. But eventually, we'd make these destructive weapons. Eventually, we'd communicate information across the world. And once we're able to communicate information across the world, aka the internet, we need a way to project that influence onto each other non-violently, because we can't cross the line into violence, because then we just end a nuclear war, or what now we would call a nuclear war, what he would call something else. And Henry Ford came from a different perspective, however, not really that different. He said we need to find a way to convert the natural energy of the world into this form of money, this form of incorruptible, scarce money, whatever. And he tried to make Bitcoin. Tesla, that I can find, did not try to make Bitcoin. Ford did try to make it in the 1920s or whatever. He failed because we didn't have the technology to do it. We didn't have the internet or the computers to do it. But he attempted it. And that's essentially what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin takes natural wealth of the world, methane flaring, solar, natural gas,
Hydro.
coal, hydro, whatever, natural wealth. That's what Ford is referring to, and convert it into the money. And that's what Ford wanted to do. He wanted to create the largest factories in the world and convert this natural energy into these forms of energy currency, as he called it. That's what Bitcoin is. You're converting hydro energy. You're converting hydro energy, nuclear energy, solar energy, wind energy into electricity, and then you're converting electricity into computational energy via computers. And then the computers are converting the computational energy into the digital energy, sats, aka bitwatts, aka bitcoins, aka bit power, aka whatever. Whatever you want to call it, the name's irrelevant. Bitcoin is just a name that Satoshi came up with. It's a completely abstract name, but that's what it is. It is a condensation of energy from natural wealth to computational energy and information into that's simply communicated over the internet. So, and I mean, it's a lot of heady words, but basically their idea, their underlying idea, and then the ones later on, basically all saying that we can't have this future world that has all these futuristic technologies function atop of money that is decreed by a government. It simply can't work. It's not a political problem. It's simply a technical problem. It can't function. You can't have the world operate. You can't have society operate in a world where you can't have war. You have to have some form of way for people to settle disputes that doesn't result in global destruction. And so Bitcoin as a weapon, shield, whatever you call it, Bitcoin is energy, Bitcoin is money, Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same idea that we have to create a way to turn to marry information and energy that actually is scarce so it can manifest these ideas. And so anyway, that's more or less what they predicted. But the stepping stone to get from here to there is the internet and the computer. You can't have Bitcoin without the computer. You can't have Bitcoin without the internet. You need both. Well, technically you could have Bitcoin with radio and other frequencies, but the internet makes it so much easier. Yeah. But yeah, those things you need. You need the computer, you need the internet. That's why they couldn't do it, because they didn't have the computer yet. They didn't have the internet yet. But now we do. And now, like I said, you have that worldview, and then you have this worldview, a world based on oil and political currency units, a world based on electricity and electric monetary units. Now you have those two worldviews. Well, at what point should we expect to begin the transition from one to the other? Probably about the time where the internet becomes globally distributed. So early 2000s. When does Bitcoin come about? Early 2000s. There were other attempts before Bitcoin, dozens of attempts before Bitcoin. They all failed. First successful attempt was Bitcoin. Only successful attempt was Bitcoin. Early 2000s. Like, okay, that's about what we expect. What we expect the characteristics of this thing to be. Well, if it fulfills Ford's predictions, it should get more resilient and more powerful the larger it grows. Okay, that's what it's been doing for 14 years. China tried to ban it. Russia tried to ban it. Thailand tried to ban it. Pakistan, India, many countries tried to ban it. They all failed. Okay, that fulfills that prediction. That makes sense. Okay, it should be a form of energy. It's a form of energy. That makes sense. We should be able to transfer natural wealth into this form of wealth. Okay, that makes sense. It's fulfilling that promise. It should have no deflation, no inflation, be perfectly scarce. Okay, that makes sense. All these things that are in this future vision, this future imagination of future world, basically Bitcoin fulfills perfectly. And there's nothing else that even comes close. And so basically, if that idea is true, and they're right about a lot of other things, then Bitcoin should be that. It's once you view the world as those two paradigms, then Bitcoin becomes obvious, because it's the most probable transition from point A to point B. And even if it's not that, even if it isn't that base layer money of the future world, the risk is so high in being fully exposed to the old world that you simply can't do it. That my first thread that blew up online was comparing us to Romans, and it's the same idea. It's like right now, everyone is everyone has exposure in olive oil and goats and milk and other commodities of the Roman era, you know. And it's like try explaining to them that we're about to upgrade to biplanes and oil over the next, 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever. It's like your diversification, this old technological paradigm is about to become irrelevant. Not because it's me putting together some fringe conspiracy theory from the government, not because it's this, that it's just not because I'm predicting some market crash or timing the market. It's simply technology that you can't have the technologies of the later 21st century survive on political currency units. It simply can't work because those technologies create an endless amount of deflation. And our current form of money requires an endless amount of inflation. They are inherently contradictory systems. And one or the other is going to collapse. Either fiat will survive and we have no technological progress, or we have technological progress and fiat collapses.
Yep.
And that's what's going to happen. And then to look at Ford and Tesla's predictions of what happens once that thing occurs. And like Ford predicted, he predicted to be pandemonium, societal, just craziness, whatever. That's kind of what we have now. But I think he was envisioning something more dramatic than what we have today. And I think he's probably right. Like the future paradigm is much better than the current paradigm.
Yep.
But the transition costs will be extremely high. And that's why I view my hope is, I know Bitcoin's going to win even without me. It's just I hope that I can help minimize the fallout from that transition cost, because it's going to be pretty high. And we tend to forget that because of our bias. We forget when we look back in history that transition costs were very high. We transitioned out of slavery into post-slavery, and that's a good thing. But we had the Civil War.
It was messy.
We had a massive transition cost for 4 years that we call the American Civil War. We transitioned from a society based on hunters and gatherers to agriculture, and that's great. But any society that was based in hunting and gathering collapsed, or going from farming, agriculture to industry like today, that's great. But if you owned a farm and you made your money based on the land of the farm and the crops of the farm, all of a sudden, as soon as the factories are built, it's like all your skills are worthless. All your crops have collapsed in price, which again is a good thing because now people can afford food. But that's kind of where we're at now. I know it's a long answer again, but basically what they predicted is they predicted the principles of Bitcoin. They didn't predict 21 million. They didn't predict proof of work, but they predict the principles of Bitcoin, that eventually the world would have to upgrade to an electric form of currency that was absolutely scarce and that was globally available, that was globally distributed, that was not able to be centrally controlled, that was convertible for natural wealth. That's what Bitcoin is. And so, yeah, that's what they predicted.
Yeah, it would be, I think it would be irrational to think that in a world dominated by technology, we would not go from an inferior monetary technology to a superior one.
Correct.
Like, I think that is actually irrational. That's like insane to think that
Yes.
would be the case when everything else in the world sees technological progress, and just the idea that for the average person, deflation is immensely good. It benefits humanity.
Yeah.
For the people who benefit from this manipulated form of money, it's bad. And so, and I also think, you mentioned the Civil War. It's like before, when we shifted from different paradigms, it was kind of like all or none, and the cost was immensely high as a collective, right? We all have to go to war. We have to kill each other. We have to do this together. And I don't know that there's been a time where it's like the paradigm shift actually can happen with no bloodshed, no war.
Yeah.
And it happens on the individual. Every person who takes on an allocation of 3% of their wealth into Bitcoin is actually shifting the paradigm. Like, I think it's the only time in history where you can have a neighborhood of 100 people. One person can shift their paradigm independent of the other 99 people, whereas before we all had to go to war to do it together. And the hope is that person can then kind of whisper to the others, hey, you can it's way better on this side. This is why you can do it too. Let me help you do it. And I think that's where Bitcoiners sort of emerge as these nodes, for lack of a better word, that can emanate this paradigm shift in a way that doesn't require us to be all or none. It just has to reach the threshold tipping point where then the all or none happens. But, it's like win the race before we go to war, as
yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it. I think something else too that people have difficulty understanding is that one of the most common, if not the most common thing I hear is that, oh, the government won't allow it or whatever. And to your point that we can have both feet in, old and new, it's like the government's actually going to enforce it, because like to use your metaphor there of having, exposure to both. It's like if you're a newspaper company and this internet thing's taking off, it's like, okay, you have 100% of your exposure to newspapers and magazines. Well, then you take 5% allocation of your budget, put it in these nerdy blogger types or whatever, just let them go play in their dusty corner office, whatever. But then, obviously as the internet grows and that grows and grows and grows, then it's going to take 7%, 10%, 20%. It's going to take a larger and larger portion of your budget. And eventually, by the end, you're going to be 80% internet bloggers, 20% newspapers and magazines. And you're going to be in your board meeting. You're going to be like, well, we should just cut the last 20%.
Yeah, like that's dragging us down. That's a novelty now.
Yeah, we're burning money. It's just sitting there. It's like, it's going to be the exact same thing. The government is going to say, Bitcoin's stupid, Bitcoin's stupid, Bitcoin's stupid. And then they'll take a little bit, they'll take a little bit more, blah, 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 and then they'll just be all in. And as you say, the race to avoid the war. My concern is that it's so fast that people panic. I mean, look at Michael Saylor. Like, what did it take him? 5 months? Like, it took Michael Saylor like 5 months. And granted, he's got like virtually all control of his company and he could do whatever he wants, whatever. But it's like, for like that just needs to be said that many companies and many nations that have extreme amounts of control and small numbers of people like that, they might make their transition really quickly. In a matter of months or years, they might go from, oh, Bitcoin's stupid to like Michael Saylor.
I don't have enough Bitcoin.
Yeah, let's sell all of our stock. Let's dump all of our stock on our shareholders. Let's borrow as much money as we can, which is inflationary, by the way, in terms of credit. And let's buy as much Bitcoin as we can. And I think that's one other thing I want to say too is that, Bitcoiners are not that people on Twitter, at least for me, I don't know about for you, all the time, like, you're wanting the end of the economy, you want the dollar to crash, or you want the end of the world. And it's like, no, no, we want the end of, or we don't want, where you're just saying it is the end of the credit, it's the end of the credit system as we know it. It's not.
It's an observation. It really is just an observation.
The economy,
and if reality hurts, then maybe you're really far from reality.
Yes. The economy will be fine. Society will be fine. Hopefully,
we won't
have a or World War III. Like, you don't have to have World War III and the collapse of society with the collapse of the dollar. You will have the collapse of the credit market, the credit system, the dollar, and all those assets that are based in that credit system will collapse. But it's not the end of the world. House prices that have been artificially pumped up for decades will collapse back to what they should be. Stocks will crash back to what they should be. 70% of the gains in the stock market are directly as a result of credit creation. I mean, it's these things are disconnected. And the funny thing is that we all know it. We all know that things are already disconnected. The stock market, house prices are already disconnected from reality. And like, it shouldn't be that crazy to say that the destruction of insane credit markets is not the destruction of the sane economy, but I guess people have trouble making that distinction. But yeah, and that's why get off to zero, to your point, is so important, because right now most people have a 100% allocation to candles, and now the light bulbs here. All we're saying is get a 5% allocation to candles. Maybe 1%
to light bulbs.
So, yeah, light bulbs. Excuse me. Yeah. Maybe 1%, maybe 20%. If you could tolerate it, I think that's great, because if this light bulb thing is true, eventually you're going to be 95% allocation. And if you just take that 5% allocation now, you've built in your 95% allocation. And when that panic hits of hyperdeflation, and when ready. All your candles are just collapsing in value simultaneously, then that emotional burden of, I could have bought Bitcoin under $10 million and I didn't. What is wrong with me? You won't have that. You won't have that pain.
Because no one stays at 5%. Like, really, it's the saying, where your money goes, your mind goes. It's like, all you need is 5% to start actually thinking of this thing. And the inevitable process that I've seen, I haven't seen this not hold true with anyone that I've spoken to, is the number, I think I've heard you say this actually, every person that puts 5% into Bitcoin starts to realize more and more that the 95% is at really big risk.
Yes.
right? And it's like, and actually by transferring 5%, you've now decreased the value of that 95%. And so the inevitable
Exactly.
flow is, well, I need 10%. Oh shit, now I need 50%. And it's like, now I need as much as I can. And I think, I would love to. It's like I hope someone makes a movie one day about what those 5 months were for Michael Saylor, because just based on the
oh,
type of person he is and his incessant drive to learn and understand something that he can't, it's like I bet you there wasn't much margin in terms of, I bet you he wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep until everything was transitioned over. And I don't think anyone else can do it that fast
yeah.
at that scale. But it just shows that, like, his sense of urgency, I bet you, was existential
Oh,
when
it
he really
was. It
saw,
was.
like, when he put the glasses on and saw things clearly, he was like, oh shit, all of that stuff is at huge risk. And
Yes.
I need to literally
Yes.
do this as quickly as possible because it allows me
Yes.
to save as much as possible. And when people get that, it's literally just what is the fastest rate of change that I can
Yes.
get on. And that's going to vary for different people and
Yes.
different companies based on complexity. But the interesting thing is the companies that will take the longest to do it are the ones who are the biggest and actually have the most wealth. And they may have started 12 months ago, but it takes a long time. And
Yeah.
so, the cool thing is now for once, the individual actually has an advantage to get in front quicker than the big companies and the big countries with all the
Yeah.
wealth. And to not take advantage of that, I think the reward we get for living in the craziest time maybe ever in humanity is that, it's like we deal with all this chaos and suffering, but the reward we get is that we have access to the world's best money before everyone else, every other human that comes after us. And it's like maybe that's the counterbalance to what we're going through right now. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, as crazy as the world is today, I'd much rather be alive today than any point in the past, you know.
Same, same.
Yeah, but that's just me. Yeah, I think Michael Saylor's a great example. For many things we talked about this discussion actually. One of them is the arrogance factor. It's like, okay, people aren't listening to me. That's fine. And honestly, Michael Saylor should be the best example. Michael Saylor has been a billionaire for 30 years. He predicted Apple before it went up like, 20x or whatever. It would everyone when people thought he was crazy because Apple stock had already gone up, he was saying, no, Apple, 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 Apple. They have a monopoly, blah, blah, blah. People adored him. It's like, he's still a multi-billionaire. He's run this company for decades, and despite it crashing in the dot-com boom, I mean, you could criticize him for his company stock crashing, but all the internet stocks crashed then. And the fact his company survived actually, I think, is a testament to something at least.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this clearly not dumb person. Okay, at the very least, he's not stupid. Okay, in the course of a few months, he went from thinking that Bitcoin was the result of online gambling or whatever to being all in and being all in that quick. And it's clear, he's made it very clear in his interviews over the last 3 years that he sleeps better at night now with 150% all in Bitcoin. Like, he sleeps better now. He's happier with his business now. And yeah, so the fact that has happened and more wealthy people are not paying attention goes to show the level which people are not willing to pay attention. I do think more people are paying attention, but it's nowhere close to what it should be. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And then the other thing you said was very interesting is that people don't realize that these kinds of thoughts of like, oh, Bitcoin is going to be risk off, whatever. Like, people don't realize that it's baked into the game theory. It can't be any other way.
Right.
It's like let's take a bank run. We've had three of the four largest bank runs in American history have happened this year in 2020. Or 2023, and we're only halfway through. It's like, what's the game theory of a bank run? If I have $1,000, or let's say $100 in a bank, um, you know, and there's a rumor of a bank run. It's like, okay, I'll just take out $10. Long shot. My bank's probably fine. Whatever. Take out $10. And I go home, I have dinner, and I realize, wait a minute, I just take out $10. My neighbor's probably taking out $10. They're probably taking. Wait, if we all take out $10, that means my other $90 is probably a little higher risk. Okay, well then maybe I should take out. I should have taken out $15 instead of 10. I'll go back to tomorrow and I'll take out another $5 something. So I go to the bank. I drive up. I get there. I'm about to take another $5.
And there's
like,
100 people there.
well, and yeah, and then there's like three more people there than normal. I'm like, okay, maybe I should take out $20, because the more you take out, the more you realize that the rest is at risk. That's the problem of a credit unwind. That's exactly what happened in 2008. Everyone thinks it's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine, until suddenly it begins to unwind and you realize that the whole perspective of risk has just changed. And now you have
Yep.
to get out. And the more you take out, the higher risk everything else is. And that's what happens. That's what's going to happen when it comes to Bitcoin. It's just going to start going up and everyone's going to freak out. And when they freak out, they'll take a 1 to 3% allocation. When they take a 1 to 3% allocation, like me, for example, I took a percent allocation. I still owned mutual funds and I still owned real estate. I was like, what am I doing? I should have a higher percent allocation. So I took a higher percent allocation. I took a higher percent allocation. And then, a few months ago, I had Tesla stock and I sold the last of that because it's like, I like Tesla as a company, but it's like, even if compared to other stock markets, even if it were a better stock, and I think there's a strong case that Tesla stock's a better stock than most other stocks, it's like, even if it was, and perhaps it's not, even in the most probable case that it is, it's like, why would I own that?
Safer to own the money.
Why? Yeah, why it's safer than it's safer. And when these banking failures started, I was like, why am I still holding Tesla stock? This is stupid. I gotta sell it. And I was like, oh, but I like the company. It's like, yeah, but my risk adverse little minion in my head was like, just sell it. So I sold all of it.
Yep.
And Tesla stock will go up in terms of dollars, but Bitcoin will probably go up in terms of Tesla stock, probably forever. And so that's the thing I try to educate people about. And I know you want to talk about the movie too. So that's why I want to make the movie. Because far too many people are addressing the symptoms. Far too many people think Bitcoiners are conspiracy theorists, and many of us are. But what is the fundamental problem here? People are not thinking about technology, and it's not even when it comes to Bitcoin. Like, think about AI, think about electric vehicles. Everything I'm saying about Bitcoin is true for those two. It's like the automakers, the GMs, the Fords, Chryslers, Toyotas, whatever. Those companies will just be done for because they can't afford to make the transition to electric vehicles like the companies are doing electric vehicles are doing now. And I think electric vehicles are a little overhyped, whatever, like whatever. But it's like, regardless of that, one way or another, we will eventually upgrade to electric vehicles. It's just
Yep.
obvious. Even if you don't believe in the climate, whatever. Even if you don't believe in that, it's obvious we'll upgrade to those. And so and then once you do the basic due diligence of these automakers, you realize that okay, basic technological paradigms, they can't transition. They're done for. They're a ticking time bomb. Or take AI. AI is developing so fast. As a filmmaker, it's like right now there's a writer strike and actor strike right now. It's like it's exactly what's happening in the film industry. Hollywood is being gutted because
Yep.
any kid can write an entire feature-length script in a matter of hours now. And right now, you can do crazy things with Photoshop. You can do crazy thing with AI. In 5 or 10 years, you'll probably will make a whole feature film on like 1,000. The cost of producing a feature film is probably going to go down by a factor of 100 to 10,000
Yeah, you can make a
over.
feature film from your bedroom in
I
10
know.
years, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Over the next 5 to 15 years, the
Yep.
cost of making a feature film is going to go from $100 million to $1 million, and then from $1 million to $100,000. It like that's deflation because AI can just produce it. And yeah, we might still produce films in the traditional sense, but for every one of those, we'll just produce 100 more of the new kind. And we're sucking away that incentive. And so Hollywood's just being gutted. They're all rioting, or excuse me, protesting, not rioting, or at least as far as I know, the hopefully not rioting. Hopefully everyone's being safe and smart and ethical. But it's all the same thing. It's all paradigms. It's all technological paradigms. It's all the same thing.
It's like Blockbuster employees
It's the same
protesting
thing.
Netflix. It's like you can do that. People
Yes.
might listen. You might get some attention, but it actually doesn't change anything about the momentum of technological change. It just
Yes.
doesn't.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
History is full of examples of people who ignore technological change. And it is the single most painful preventative thing that people willfully do. They willfully ignore technological change because they want to think that they can get by. And perhaps that's true for a period of time, but anyway, we're seeing it all over society right now, and all these different things that these paradigms are changing, and they're changing faster and faster and faster. And the biggest paradigm change of all is Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin paradigm change is the antidote to all these other changes.
Mm.
Because what do you tell these writers that are about to go to business? What do you tell the people on the assembly lines of Ford that are about to lose their jobs in the next 5 to 15 years? Like, what do you tell them? Because they're not employable anymore. In the same way that the horse is no longer employable because of the locomotive, it's like that's the pain. That's why people don't want to believe all these technological changes, is
Right.
because they don't want to accept the economic incentive to hire them. You can't pay these people $50 an hour anymore. Maybe $10 an hour, maybe $5 an hour eventually, but it's like the economic incentive to hire them simply is not there. And we think that's a bad thing. And there are negative trade-offs, and that negative trade-off is that they can't earn an income. And so when there are less means to earn an income, you have to have a way to store your economic value. When the options for producing an income go down, you have to have a better option for saving for the future. And so really the writers that are protesting right now, like you said, that they're Blockbuster employees protesting Netflix. But really the problem that needs to be solved for them is not regulating or stopping the inevitable march of technology. It's directing them towards a form of technology that's actually going to help them save their economic energy in the future.
Yeah.
Because then no matter how far down their wages go, no matter how far their wages deflate along with everything else in society, those deflationary productivity gains in society flow back to the money, and it offsets all those losses, so to speak. Like that's why you can't have all these technological paradigms survive with political currency units, with US dollars. They can't coexist.
They can't coexist.
Yeah, they can't have. And so that's what this movie is going to focus on. It's going to focus on energy. It's going to focus on technology making energy more abundant. It's going to focus on money being the informational system at which we communicate energy to one another. And it's going to focus on how up to this point in history we've manipulated energy and distorted it for our own short-term gain, and how Bitcoin actually resolves that issue and actually is essential in repricing all these coming paradigms and helping people save for the future. Because that's going to be the unfortunate truth. The AI is just going to continue. People are going to have less and less and less jobs, and the government is just going to continue to steal and steal and steal people's wealth to offset the deflation of these technologies. And you need Bitcoin to bridge that gap. It's exactly what's been predicted. It's exactly what makes sense. It's the perfect timing, and that's what the movie's going to be about. It's about Bitcoin, but it's also about energy. It's about people understanding the transition. And so that's the why. The why is to help people understand, because as soon as the government figures this out, as soon as you get 50 Michael Saylors, the opportunity for the average person to adjust before things become 100 times more difficult to adjust than they are now, it's done for. Right now you can buy a lifetime's worth of Bitcoin for $100.
Yeah, it's
$100.
a very precious window of opportunity.
I know. In
Doesn't
5
come
years,
twice.
no, it doesn't come twice. It's just going to come once. In 5 years, that cost will be $10,000. Like, how many people do you know that $10,000?
Right.
How many people do you know $100? It's like,
How many people do I know that could forfeit coffee for a month and buy a lifetime generational wealth of Bitcoin? But I have no idea that that's the case. Yeah. And I think filmmaking is like, creating films is basically the modern day expression of an ancient learning technology, which is storytelling. And where did this love for filmmaking come from? Because obviously making a film is not an easy thing, right? There's probably, I don't know much about it, but what is the gravitate? Like, you can do podcasts or you can make a film. Why a film?
Because people's attention spans are just garbage. Including mine. It's just people will not watch this 2-hour podcast. I'll send this podcast to probably a dozen people, maybe one. Well, no, maybe 3 will click on it. One will watch it like most of the way through. If I've
sent 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah. If you're watching this, good for you. But it's because that's why it's very low quality. It's just conversation. This is useful and everything. But to a certain extent, they're right, because in our discussion here, we've probably repeated the same number of ideas, a few different times, different ways. So there's a certain bit of repetition. Like that's not a bad thing. It's just how conversation goes. But people won't be willing to do that. But they might be willing to watch a well-produced, articulate film that has visuals, that has idea to idea to idea, logically placed. And so that's the idea. Most people won't read a book. They won't watch podcasts, but they might watch a movie, and that movie might, at least in your story from earlier, get people to think, what is money? What is the worldview that I actually have? Because most people think that the Bitcoin worldview is crazy because they don't realize that they're in a worldview themselves. That's the ultimate reality. And the movie is an attempt to expose the worldview people currently believe, and then expose them to this differing worldview, and just make it obvious by so well defining the problem that they're like, oh wait, my worldview is crap.
Mm.
It is garbage.
Yeah, make it unequivocally obvious.
Yes, make the problem so obvious that the solution becomes inevitable. Because that's really what it is. That if Bitcoin is what we think it is, and I think there's at least a 95% chance we're right.
I like those odds.
Yeah, probably more like 99. But it's like the odds are so high, and helping people at least take that first step of willing to admit, I might be wrong about this new thing because I was wrong about the current thing. And that's really what most people are. Most people are wrong about their current worldview because they don't even realize they have a current worldview.
Right.
So
They're so in it, they
yeah,
don't even see it for what it
yeah,
is.
exactly.
They're in the water, they don't even know what water is.
That's the old Matrix metaphor. Bitcoiners love the Matrix movie, and that's why is that we're in this world. The world's been fine for us, but we believe a certain subset of assumptions that are not true. And as soon as you realize that those aren't true, like I did, and a few years ago, then immediately it becomes, wait a minute, if I was arrogant enough, if I was naive enough to think that these things were true, and everyone else still thinks these things are true, that's a really big problem.
Hmm.
That's what we saw in 2008 when everyone was so sure. Well, what's the Mark Twain quote? I've someone told me it was in. I've not seen The Big Short, the movie. People keep telling me you need to watch it, but I've heard it's in the movie too. The Mark Twain quote. It's not the
No.
things you don't know that cause you trouble. It's the things
You think you know that aren't true.
Yes, that.
I
And
have
and
heard
that
that.
that's what most people are right now. Most people assume things to be true that simply are not true. And that's what the movie is hopefully attempting to do, to build up from first principles so well that people begin to realize that maybe not everything they believed about the world as it is precisely true. And once you realize that, and then once you look at the lies, then you see truth, obviously. So,
Yep. When are
that,
people going to be able to watch the movie, and how do they support you?
well, I really want to post it online for free. That's the hope. I've been fundraising for it. It's been a great support so far. I've been fundraising for about a month. Online, we've raised about 15 million satoshis, which is about $4,000, something like that, at
Cool.
today's filming, or at today's recording of the podcast here. Um,
Are you going to make it value for value? I'm really excited for the day that we have a fountain equivalent for, like, think if YouTube and Fountain had a baby, censorship resistant, streaming sats, value for value. It's like the more people watch, the more they contribute. But yeah, I'm sure you could just, make it value for value. If people get value from it, they send you sats. I think that's the way of the future.
I think it's way of the future, but we're not there yet. So, that's the unfortunate reality. I'll probably just post it online for free. I know
Cool.
it probably wouldn't make money if I try to sell it, and so yeah, right now I'm just trying to find ways to cover costs, cover my costs, cover the cost of filming, cover the cost of post-production, which is probably where most of the costs will go. Well, no, but definitely where the costs will go, because the script is easy. I'm volunteering all my time to write the script and film the thing. So yeah, I think it'll be pretty good, and my hope is that to make it good enough and to finish it soon enough and quick enough that number one, it's useful for people, but number two, that it's well enough made that perhaps in the future we get more funding or we're able to create a bigger project with a bigger vision. Because 2024, 2025 will probably be pretty big years.
Yes.
Just looking at credit markets, looking at interest rates, probably some fireworks are going to happen 2024, 2025, 2026. So I want to do everything I can to prepare for that, for other people. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's the hope of the movie. And yeah, if people want to support, any donation would be really valuable. The goal is for every dollar donated, every U.S. political currency unit that's going to go to zero anyway, or trend towards zero. That the hope is for every dollar spent on production that we orange pill one person. So
Cool.
roughly $20,000.
20,000 people.
Yeah, 20,000 Bitcoiners. Million views. That's 2% Bitcoiner to view ratio or whatever. And I think I hope we get 1 million views or 500,000 views or something substantial. And if that's the case, then I think easily we'll orange pill 20,000 people. So yeah, and if you donate $30, then we'll put your name in the credits unless you want to remain anonymous. But hopefully that way it could be a little easy way for you to orange pill your family or friends or whatever. Like, hey,
I'm in
I
the credits.
yeah, I helped make this movie. It's got 1 million views, 1 million people see my name. You might want to watch it. And
Cool.
then if I do a good enough job, it'll be entertaining enough that they actually keep watching it. So anyway, if you donate $30, you get your name in the credits. find a way to orange pill people. How many hours do people spend trying to orange pill friends or coworkers? I mean, if anyway, so we're about a quarter of the way there, or no, about a fifth of the way there in terms of funding it, which got a long way to go. Kind of like Bitcoin, we have a long way to go, but we've come a long way in a short period of time, and I'm optimistic. So
Amazing. Luke, thank you for joining us at the Bitcoin Stoa today. If people want to read or watch or follow what you do, how do they find you on the internet, either you personally or how to support your film?
yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Luke Broyles, Broyles. YouTube, same thing. I keep posting about YouTube, yet people say they don't realize they have a YouTube. So I do have a YouTube. It's Luke Broyles. I've got like 15,000 Twitter followers, 2,000 YouTube subscribers or whatever. So that feels great.
Cool.
And then for the film specifically, it's The Case for Bitcoin. It's Geyser's featured project right now. So if you just look up Geyser, there's also a GoFundMe by the same name, The Case for Bitcoin. So if you could donate to either of those, that would mean the world to me. Just help me get this thing done, and like we started this conversation with, my hope is to have as many people in the developing world upgrade to better forms of energy as quickly as possible. And I think Bitcoin is one of the most urgent upgrades of energy for people. And so hopefully this film inspires, even this, some people have asked me, why waste your time on this film or whatever. It's like, if I could just help one person, if I could just help one dad of 3 kids in India or Indonesia or Guatemala, somewhere in the world, get on a Bitcoin standard that helps them,
Have a different life.
yeah,
A better life.
help them live a better life and help them make it through the transition costs. Like, to me, that's worth it. And being on Twitter, getting all the positive messages from people, many of which are in the developing world, it's really something. So yeah, if you're to help me make this film, it'd mean a lot to me. So
Amazing. Luke,
yeah.
thank you for everything you do. To everyone listening, thanks for being here. If you enjoyed the conversation, you can support the project by heading to bitcoinstoa.com, sending some sats to the QR code on the homepage. Or instead of doing that, why don't you find Luke's project, help him make the film, help us make a really juicy orange pill that we can help a bunch of people in the world, a bunch of curious people. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you later.
Yeah, best wishes, everyone. Thank you.